Jake Morrison walked into the massive council chamber with his head held high. The room was bigger than any building on Earth, with walls that seemed to stretch up forever. Strange lights floated in the air, casting weird shadows on the floor. All around him sat the representatives of 47 different alien species, each one looking down at him like he was some kind of bug. The human ambassador had been doing this job for 3 years now. 3 long years of listening to these aliens tell humanity what they could and could not do. 3 years of watching them make rules that hurt human colonies while helping their own people. 3 years of being treated like children who needed to be taught how to behave. Jake stood at the speaking platform in the center of the room. Above him, the massive form of Chairman Vex Thul loomed like a mountain made of crystal. The aliens' voice boomed through the chamber, making the floor shake under Jake's feet. The human representative will explain why his species continues to violate council trade protocols, Vex Thul announced. His voice sounded like breaking glass mixed with thunder. Your people have been selling advanced weapons to non-council species. This is forbidden. Jake looked up at the chairman without flinching. He had heard this complaint many times before. The humans had been trading fairly with smaller alien groups that the council ignored. These species needed help and humanity was willing to provide it. But the council saw this as a threat to their power. With respect, Chairman, Jake said in a clear voice that carried across the huge room. Humanity has the right to trade with whoever we choose. The species we help are not your enemies. They are just trying to survive. A chorus of angry sounds filled the chamber. The bird-like Altarians screeched their disapproval. The slug-like Centaurians made wet slapping noises with their tentacles. The wolf creatures from Proxima howled their anger. Jake stood his ground and waited for them to quiet down. From the observation deck high above, Captain Lisa Rodriguez watched the scene unfold. She commanded the human diplomatic ship Terra's Voice, which was currently docked at the council station. Lisa had been Jake's friend since their academy days, and she could see the tension in his shoulders. The man was reaching his breaking point. The Zephyrian delegate rose from his seat, his metallic body gleaming under the chamber lights. When he spoke, his voice was like nails on a chalkboard. Perhaps the humans need to be reminded of their place in this galaxy. You are a young species with no understanding of proper civilization. Your democracy is a joke, a system where the ignorant masses make decisions they cannot comprehend. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He had listened to insults about human technology, human culture, and human intelligence. But this attack on democracy, on the very foundation of human society, was too much. Behind him, he heard Lisa's sharp intake of breath from the observation deck. Jake took a deep breath and looked around the chamber. He saw the smug expressions on dozens of alien faces. These beings thought they were superior because they had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. They believed their age gave them wisdom, but Jake saw only arrogance and fear. Thank you for making this easy, Jake said quietly. His voice was calm, but it carried clearly through the silent chamber. For 3 years, humanity has tried to work within your system. We have followed your rules, paid your taxes, and listened to your lectures. We have been patient even when you treated us like children. Vex Thul's crystalline form shifted slightly. Human Morrison, you will watch your tone when addressing this council. Jake smiled, but there was no warmth in it. No, Chairman, I will not. Because as of this moment, humanity is withdrawing from all diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council. We are done. The chamber erupted in chaos. Aliens shouted, screeched, and roared their shock and anger. Some delegates jumped to their feet, while others began rapid conversations in languages that sounded like static or music or grinding metal. Above it all, Chairman Vex Thul's voice boomed for order. But Jake was not finished. He raised his hand, and somehow his gesture commanded attention. The chamber slowly grew quiet again, all eyes focused on the small human at the center of the room. Effective immediately, human spaces closed to all council vessels. Jake continued. Our colonies will no longer participate in council trade networks. We reject all council authority over human affairs. Any council ship attempting to enter our territory will be turned away. The Draknari war chief, a massive reptilian creature covered in scars, leaned forward in his seat. You cannot survive without the council, human. Your species is weak and isolated. Jake looked directly at the war chief. We survived and thrived for thousands of years before we met you. We will do so again. The difference is that now we have friends among the species you have ignored and mistreated. They remember who helped them when the council turned away. From her position above, Lisa felt a surge of pride. Jake was magnificent in his defiance, standing alone against the most powerful organization in the galaxy. She activated her communicator and sent a coded message to the human fleet waiting just outside council space. It was time to go home. Chairman Vexthul rose to his full height, his crystal body glowing with anger. If you leave, human, there will be consequences. The council has ways of dealing with rebellious species. Jake gathered his papers and turned toward the exit. Over his shoulder, he called back, "Try us." As the human ambassador walked out of the chamber, the council delegates sat in stunned silence. In 5 minutes, their carefully balanced galaxy had been turned upside down. Humanity controlled 12 star systems, 3 major trade routes, and some of the most advanced technology in known space. More importantly, they had just proven they were not afraid of the council's threats. Lisa met Jake at the chamber exit, and together they walked toward their ship. Behind them, the sounds of panicked alien voices grew louder. The Galactic Council was about to learn what happened when they pushed humanity too far. 3 weeks had passed since Jake Morrison walked out of the council chamber. The effects of his bold declaration were spreading across the galaxy like ripples in a pond. What had started as one human's act of defiance was now becoming a crisis that threatened the very foundation of galactic civilization. Admiral Pete Collins stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Earth's Defender, watching as another council convoy approached the edge of human space. The ships were massive freighters belonging to the Altarian Empire, loaded with luxury goods meant for the inner worlds, but they would not be passing through human territory today. Admiral, the Altarian fleet is requesting passage through the Soul Jump Gate, reported Lieutenant Mary Johnson from her station. They claim they have trading rights under the old council agreements. Pete shook his head. Send them the standard message. Human space is closed to all council vessels. They can find another route or turn back. The response came quickly. The Altarian captain's angry voice filled the bridge, translated by the ship's computer. This is outrageous. Our cargo is worth millions of credits. We demand safe passage. Demand all you want, Pete replied calmly. The answer is still no. On the view screen, the Admiral watched as the Altarian ships slowly turned away from the jump gate. Their detour would add weeks to their journey and cost them a fortune in fuel. But that was no longer humanity's problem. Similar scenes were playing out across human space. The Centauri Federation had 3 food convoys stranded outside human territory, their perishable cargo slowly rotting while they searched for alternative routes. The Vegan Trade Consortium found their regular shipping lanes blocked, forcing them to use old, dangerous paths through asteroid fields and dead space. Captain Amy Patterson was dealing with a more serious situation near the outer rim of human space. Her patrol ships had detected a Draknari war fleet moving toward the human colony of New Terra. The reptilian warriors were known for taking what they wanted by force, and they seemed to think humanity's withdrawal from the council made them easy targets. Amy stood in the command center of her ship, the Liberty Bell, as her fleet moved into position. She had 12 ships under her command, facing off against 30 Draknari warships. The odds were not good, but Amy had faith in human technology and training. Draknari fleet, this is Captain Patterson of the Human Defense Force, she broadcast on all frequencies. You are approaching human territory without permission. Turn back immediately. The Draknari war chief's response was a snarl of contempt. Weak humans, you cannot stop us. We will take what we need from your colony. Amy smiled grimly. I was hoping you would say that. The battle was swift and decisive. Human ships moved with precision, their advanced weapons cutting through Draknari shields like paper. The reptilian warriors had expected to face the same. Humans who had meekly accepted council authority for 3 years. Instead, they found themselves fighting a species that had been quietly preparing for this moment. Within an hour, half the Draknari fleet was destroyed or disabled. The rest retreated in confusion, their proud war chief broadcasting threats that rang hollow in the face of his defeat. News of the battle spread quickly through the galactic communication networks, carrying a clear message. Humanity was not defenseless. Back on Earth, Jake Morrison was working with President Nathan Clark to establish new relationships with the galaxy's forgotten species. In a secure conference room beneath the Capitol building, they held meetings with representatives from dozens of non-council worlds. The Kepler Mining Consortium had been one of the first to reach out. Their leader, Director Ben Turner, had arrived, on Earth just days after humanity's withdrawal from the Council. The mining operation controlled rich asteroid fields that the Council had largely ignored, but which held vast quantities of rare metals essential for advanced technology. The Council has never treated us as equals, Ben explained during one of their meetings. They take our resources at below-market prices and give us nothing in return. But you humans, you offer fair trades and respect. Jake nodded. That's all we've ever wanted from the Council. Apparently it was too much to ask. Similar conversations were happening across human space. The small Epsilon colony had advanced medical technology that could revolutionize healthcare. The Tau Ceti researchers had developed new methods of terraforming that could create habitable worlds in half the time. The Barnard Star shipyards could produce vessels that rivaled anything the Council races built. All of these species had been dismissed by the Council as minor powers, not worth serious attention. But humanity saw their potential and offered them something the Council never had: partnership instead of dominance. Dr. Helen Wright, Earth's former chief scientist, was leading a research team on the independent world of New Montana. The planet had been settled by human colonists who wanted to escape Council oversight, and it had become a haven for scientists and inventors from across the galaxy. We're making breakthrough discoveries every day, Helen reported during a video conference with Earth's leadership. Without the Council's restrictions on research, we're pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Our new faster-than-light communication system will be ready for testing within months. The Council was beginning to take notice of these developments. Emergency sessions were called as trade revenues dropped, and member species began questioning the organization's effectiveness. The carefully maintained balance of power that had kept the Council in control for centuries was crumbling. Chairman Vexthul found himself facing growing criticism from his own supporters. The Altarian Empire had lost 60% of its shipping revenue in just 3 weeks. The Centauri Federation was reporting food shortages on several worlds. Even the mighty Draknari were licking their wounds after their humiliating defeat at human hands. But the most troubling development was the growing interest from other Council species in humanity's alternative approach. Secret communications were being exchanged, with species quietly asking about the possibility of joining the human alliance. The very idea was unthinkable just a month ago, but now it seemed like a realistic option. Jake Morrison received reports of these developments with satisfaction. Humanity had not started this conflict, but they were determined to finish it on their own terms. The galaxy was about to learn that there was more than one way to build a civilization among the stars. 6 months had passed since humanity severed all ties with the Galactic Council. The crisis was no longer just an inconvenience. It had become a disaster that threatened to destroy the Council's power forever. Chairman Vexthul stood before the emergency assembly, his crystal body dim with worry. Around him, the representatives of the remaining Council species argued and shouted at each other. The chamber that had once been filled with confident voices now echoed with panic and desperation. The Vegan Trade Consortium has lost 60% of its revenue, announced Councillor Zethmar, his tentacles writhing with anxiety. My people are facing economic collapse. We cannot survive much longer without access to human trade routes. The Procyon Banking Guild representative, a creature that looked like a walking tree made of metal, creaked as it spoke. Our losses are even worse. Frozen human accounts represent billions of credits in assets. Our entire financial system is at risk. Vexthul raised his massive arms for silence. The gesture that had once commanded instant respect now barely managed to quiet the desperate voices. We must find a solution. The humans cannot be allowed to destroy everything we have built. But the humans were not just surviving their isolation. They were thriving. Dr. Helen Wright stood in her new laboratory on New Montana, watching as her team tested their latest breakthrough. The quantum energy core hummed quietly in its containment field, producing more power than any council technology could generate. Energy output is stable at 300% of theoretical maximum, reported her assistant, Dr. Carl Johnson. The older scientist had been forced to retire from council service when he criticized their restrictive research policies. Now he was free to pursue ideas that the council had called impossible. Helen smiled as she watched the readings. The council always said our approach to quantum mechanics was wrong. I wonder what they would say now. The answer came sooner than she expected. A priority message arrived on her secure communicator, marked with diplomatic codes. Helen frowned as she read the contents. The message was from someone claiming to represent Chairman Vexthul himself, requesting a secret meeting to discuss possible cooperation. They want to talk, Helen told Carl, showing him the message. After 6 months of calling us primitive rebels, they want to negotiate. Carl laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Of course they do. Their whole system is falling apart, and they need us to fix it. The meeting was arranged for neutral territory in the Epsilon Eridani system. The location was chosen carefully. Epsilon Eridani was home to several species that had rejected council authority years ago, making it the perfect place for secret negotiations. Retired diplomat Carl Johnson was selected to represent humanity at the meeting. He had years of experience dealing with council politics, but, more importantly, he had no official position that would make the meeting seem like formal recognition of council authority. The council's representative was Sub-Chancellor Kixhal, a spider-like creature who had served as Vexthul's chief advisor for decades. Carl met him in a small conference room aboard a civilian transport ship with only basic recording equipment present. The council recognizes that mistakes may have been made, Kixhal began, his multiple eyes darting nervously around the room. Perhaps we were too hasty in our judgments of human capabilities. Carl leaned back in his chair, completely relaxed. Mistakes were made? That's an interesting way to describe 3 years of insults and unfair treatment. The alien's mandibles clicked together anxiously. We are prepared to offer significant concessions, reduced trade taxes, representation on key committees, even a voice in military planning. Surely this demonstrates our willingness to treat humanity as an equal partner. Equal partner? Carl repeated the words as if they tasted bad. You mean, like the partnership where you told us our democracy was a joke? Or the partnership where you blocked our trade with species you considered beneath your notice? Kixhal's alien features made it hard to read his emotions, but his body language screamed desperation. The chairman is prepared to formally apologize for any unfortunate words spoken in the heat of political discussion. We value humanity's contributions to galactic civilization. Carl stood up and walked to the small window, looking out at the stars. Let me tell you what humanity has accomplished in the past 6 months. We formed alliances with 23 independent species. Our new quantum energy technology makes your power systems look like campfires. Our communication networks allow instant contact across the galaxy, and we did all of this without your help. The spider-like alien shifted uncomfortably. These achievements are impressive, but surely you recognize the benefits of formal council membership. The stability, the security, the established trade relationships. You mean the stability where you threaten anyone who doesn't follow your rules? The security where you ignore attacks on smaller species? The trade relationships where you set all the prices and terms? Carl turned back to face the council representative. We've seen your idea of benefits. No thank you. But Carl was not finished. He activated his communicator and began broadcasting the conversation on all human frequencies. Within minutes, the secret meeting was being watched by millions of humans across dozens of star systems. I think the people should hear your generous offer, Carl said with a slight smile. After all, we believe in democracy, The citizens get to decide their own fate. Kixhal's eyes went wide with alarm. This meeting was supposed to be confidential. You cannot broadcast council diplomatic communications. Watch us, Carl replied, using the same words Jake Morrison had spoken in the council chamber 6 months earlier. The broadcast spread beyond human space. The independent species that had joined humanity's alliance watched with interest. Even some council species received copies through back channels, seeing for themselves how desperate their leadership had become. On Earth, President Nathan Clark called an emergency session of the Colonial Senate. The elected representatives gathered to discuss the council's offer, but the debate was brief. The vote was unanimous. Rejection. The council had their chance to treat us with respect, President Clark announced to the galaxy. They chose insults and threats instead. Now, they come begging for our help because their system is failing. But we remember who stood with us when times were hard, and it was not the council. Back on the transport ship, Kixhal made one final desperate plea. If you reject our offer, there will be consequences. The council has resources you cannot imagine. Military forces, economic weapons, political pressure. Carl gathered his things and headed for the door. Threaten all you want. We've heard it before. The difference is that now we have friends who will stand with us, and they outnumber you. As the meeting ended in failure, Chairman Vex Thol received the news in his private chambers. The council's first attempt at negotiation had not only failed, but had been turned into a public humiliation. The humans had shown the entire galaxy how weak the council had become. Worse still, intelligence reports were arriving from across council space. More species were questioning their membership. Some were openly discussing withdrawal. The careful balance of fear and dependence that had kept the council in power for centuries was crumbling. The humans had not just refused to come back. They had proven that life without the council was not only possible but better. And that realization was spreading through the galaxy like wildfire. 1 year had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council. What had started as a bold act of defiance had grown into something much bigger. Commander Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her ship, watching as delegates from 23 different species signed the charter that would create the Free Trade Coalition. The ceremony was taking place on Kepler Station, a massive structure built in the neutral zone between human and council space. The station had been completed in just 8 months, a testament to what could be accomplished when species worked together as equals instead of following the orders of distant masters. This is a historic moment, Kate said to her communications officer, Lieutenant Mark Thompson. We're watching the birth of a new kind of galactic government. On the main screen, representatives from across the galaxy were putting their names to the document that would change everything. The Epsilon Colony. Miners stood beside the Tau Ceti researchers. The Barnard Star shipbuilders shook hands with the new Montana scientists. Species that had never even spoken to each other before were now allies in a common cause. But the celebration was interrupted by urgent news from the Andromeda sector. A priority message arrived from the Deep Space Monitoring Station, and the words made everyone in the room go silent. Unknown energy signature detected in the Andromeda galaxy, reported the station commander. The readings are off the charts. Whatever this thing is, it's putting out enough power to destroy entire star systems. President Nathan Clark received the report in his office on Earth. The leader of the United Human Colonies had been dealing with constant crises as the old galactic order collapsed, but this was different. This was a threat to everyone, council and coalition alike. How long do we have? Nathan asked his science advisor, Dr. Helen Wright, who had returned from New Montana for this emergency meeting. Helen looked at the data streaming across her tablet. If the energy continues to grow at its current rate, the wave will reach inhabited systems within 6 months. The damage could be catastrophic. Nathan turned to his military commander, General Frank Martinez. The grizzled veteran had been organizing the human defense forces since the split with the council, preparing for the possibility of war. But this was not something that could be fought with ships and weapons. What are our options, General? Nathan asked. Frank studied the tactical display showing the energy wave's projected path. We need a joint mission. Human technology alone might not be enough to handle something this big. We'll need help from every species we can get. The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. For decades, the Galactic Council had claimed to be the galaxy's protector. They had justified their authority by saying that only they could coordinate responses to major threats. Now, when a real crisis had emerged, they were nowhere to be found. Jake Morrison, now serving as humanity's foreign minister, was already reaching out to coalition partners. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every member species offered ships, technology, and personnel for the mission. The spirit of cooperation that had built the coalition was now being tested by its first real challenge. But the most surprising response came from an unexpected source. 3 council species sent secret messages offering to help, despite the official policy of their government. The messages were brief and carefully worded, but the meaning was clear. Not everyone in council space supported their leader's stubborn refusal to work with humanity. Colonel Frank Martinez was chosen to lead the joint mission to Andromeda. His fleet included ships from 12 different species, each contributing their unique capabilities to the effort. The human vessels provided advanced sensors and energy shields. The Kepler miners brought specialized drilling equipment. The Tau Ceti scientists offered their expertise in energy manipulation. The journey to Andromeda took 3 weeks, during which the diverse crew learned to work together. Language barriers were overcome with translation software. Cultural differences were set aside in the face of the common threat. By the time they reached their destination, they were no longer separate species working together, but a unified team with a single goal. What they found in Andromeda was beyond anything they had imagined. The ancient artifact was the size of a small moon, made of materials that seemed to bend light around them. Energy poured from its surface in waves that distorted space itself. Nearby stars were being drained of their power, their light dimming as the artifact grew stronger. "It's some kind of ancient weapon," reported Dr. Sarah Kim, the mission's chief scientist. "The energy patterns suggest it was designed to consume stellar matter and convert it to pure power." Frank studied the readings from his command ship. "How do we stop something like that?" The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the Tau Ceti researchers, a young alien named Zekthar, had been studying the artifact's energy patterns. His species had always been fascinated by ancient technology, and he recognized something in the alien device's design. "The artifact is not trying to destroy," Zekthar explained during the mission briefing. "It is trying to communicate. The energy patterns are not random. They follow mathematical sequences that could be a form of language." Working together, the joint team managed to establish communication with the ancient intelligence controlling the artifact. The conversation that followed revealed a tragic story. The device was the last remnant of a civilization that had died out millions of years ago, left behind to search for other intelligent life in the galaxy. Instead of destroying the artifact, the coalition team found a way to redirect its energy into a controlled state. The ancient intelligence agreed to limit its power output in exchange for regular communication with the younger species of the galaxy. What had started as a crisis became an opportunity for learning and growth. News of the mission's success spread across known space within hours. The coalition had faced a threat that could have destroyed countless worlds, and they had solved it through cooperation and understanding rather than force. The contrast with the Council's approach was stark and undeniable. Back in Council space, Chairman Vexthul watched the reports with growing despair. His government had been completely absent during the crisis, paralyzed by political infighting and bureaucratic procedures. While they debated and formed committees, the coalition had acted decisively and saved the galaxy. The political consequences were immediate and devastating. 7 more Council species announced their withdrawal within days of the mission's success. They cited the Council's failure to respond to the Andromeda crisis as proof that the old system no longer worked. On Earth, President Nathan Clark addressed the galaxy from the steps of the Colonial Senate building. His words were broadcast to every inhabited world, carrying a message of hope and unity that resonated across species barriers. "Today we have proven that different species can work together as equals," Nathan said, looking directly into the camera. We have shown that cooperation is stronger than domination, that respect is more powerful than fear. The galaxy has seen what we can accomplish when we stand united. The speech marked the end of the Galactic Council's claim to moral authority. They had positioned themselves as the galaxy's protectors, but when protection was truly needed, they had failed completely. The coalition, built on principles of equality and mutual respect, had succeeded where the Council could not. As Frank Martinez's fleet returned home, they carried with them more than just the satisfaction of a job well done. They brought proof that humanity's vision of galactic cooperation was not just idealistic dreaming, but a practical reality that could solve the greatest challenges facing all species. 2 years had passed since Jake Morrison walked out of the council chamber. The galaxy was now a completely different place. President Nathan Clark stood at the window of his office on Kepler 442b, the new capital world of the human colonial alliance, watching as ships from dozens of different species came and went from the orbital stations above. The planet had been chosen as the alliance capital because it belonged to no single species. It was a new world, terraformed using the combined knowledge of 12 different civilizations. Human engineering had created the atmosphere, while alien botanists had designed the plant life. The result was something beautiful and unique, a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. Nathan turned away from the window as his aide announced the arrival of the morning briefing team. Foreign Minister Jake Morrison entered first, followed by General Frank Martinez and Dr. Helen Wright. These three had been with him since the beginning, and together they had helped reshape the galaxy. "What's the status of the council situation?" Nathan asked as they gathered around the conference table. Jake opened his folder and pulled out the latest intelligence reports. 31 of their original 47 member species have now joined the alliance. The Altarian Empire officially signed the membership agreement yesterday. That leaves only 16 species still loyal to the old council. Frank leaned forward in his chair. Our sources inside Council Space report complete economic collapse in several sectors. The Draknari war fleets haven't been paid in months. Some of their commanders are considering switching sides. Nathan nodded grimly. There was no satisfaction in watching the council's suffering, but their stubborn refusal to change had left the galaxy with no choice. "Any word from Chairman Vexthal?" Helen consulted her tablet. "Intelligence suggests he's facing a revolt within his own government. Several of the remaining council species are demanding his resignation. The crystal beings of Rigel are particularly angry about the economic losses." The meeting was interrupted by Nathan's secretary, who announced an urgent priority message from the council. The four leaders exchanged glances. After 2 years of silence, what could the council possibly want to say? The message was from Chairman Vexthal himself, transmitted on the emergency diplomatic frequency. When Nathan activated the viewer, the massive crystal being appeared on the screen, but he looked different than before. His body was dim and cracked, showing signs of stress that Nathan had never seen in the proud alien leader. "President Clark," Vexthal began, his voice lacking its former authority, "I am requesting a formal meeting to discuss the current situation in the galaxy. The council recognizes that changes must be made." Nathan looked at his advisors before responding. "What kind of changes are you talking about, Chairman?" There was a long pause before Vexthal answered. "The Galactic Council formally requests membership in the Human Colonial Alliance." The silence in the room was complete. After 2 years of conflict, threats, and stubborn refusal to negotiate, the council was finally admitting defeat. But Nathan had learned to be careful when dealing with desperate opponents. The council as an organization, or the individual species that make up the council? Nathan asked carefully. The individual species," Vexthal replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "The council structure would be dissolved. Each species would apply for alliance membership separately." Jake leaned over to whisper in Nathan's ear. "This is what we've been waiting for, complete victory, but we need to be smart about how we handle it." Nathan nodded and turned back to the screen. "Chairman Vexthal, the Alliance will consider applications from any species that agrees to our Charter of Rights and democratic principles. However, The applications must come through proper channels, not as demands or threats. I understand, Vexthul said. I will begin the process immediately. After the transmission ended, the 4 leaders sat in silence for several minutes. The war was over. The Galactic Council, the organization that had ruled the galaxy for centuries, was officially surrendering. But there was still work to be done. Frank pulled up the tactical displays showing the remaining trouble spots in the galaxy. We still have the Draknari military fleets to deal with. Some of their commanders might try to become warlords rather than accept Alliance authority. Helen nodded. And there are dozens of worlds that have been damaged by the economic collapse. We'll need massive reconstruction efforts to get them back on their feet. Nathan stood up and walked back to the window. Outside, he could see construction, crews working on the new Alliance Senate building. The structure was designed to accommodate representatives from over 50 different species, each with their own environmental needs and cultural requirements. Jake, I want you to personally handle the Council species applications, Nathan said. Make sure they understand that membership comes with responsibilities as well as benefits. No more special treatment, no more considering themselves superior to other species. Jake smiled. It will be my pleasure. I think some of them are going to find democracy very educational. The formal dissolution of the Galactic Council took place 6 months later. The ceremony was held in the old council chamber on Rigel Prime, the same room where Jake Morrison had made his defiant stand 2.5 years earlier. But instead of being torn down, the chamber was converted into a museum dedicated to the dangers of authoritarian rule. Ambassador Jake Morrison, now the Alliance's chief diplomatic officer, stood at the same speaking platform where he had announced humanity's withdrawal. But this time, he was welcoming former enemies as new allies. Today marks the end of an era, Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. The age of species dominating other species is over. We begin a new chapter based on equality, respect, and cooperation. Chairman Vexthul, no longer holding any official position, sat in the audience watching the ceremony. His crystal body had regained some of its former brightness, though he would never again wield the power he had once commanded. Some observers said he looked relieved. The individual species that had once made up the council were slowly being integrated into the alliance structure. The process was not always smooth. Some struggled with the concept of democratic representation. Others had difficulty accepting that smaller species had equal voices in government decisions. But the children adapted more quickly than their parents. On worlds across the galaxy, young beings from different species worked and played together, learning that cooperation was normal rather than unusual. Human schools welcomed alien students, while human children studied on worlds with different gravity and strange-colored suns. Dr. Helen Wright established the Galactic Research Institute on New Montana, where scientists from dozens of species worked together on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. The quantum communication network that had started as a human invention now connected every Alliance world, allowing instant communication across impossible distances. President Nathan Clark's final act before retiring was to sign the Universal Rights Charter, a document that guaranteed basic freedoms to all intelligent beings regardless of species. The charter was written in 43 different languages and broadcast to every inhabited world in known space. As Nathan handed over power to his elected successor, President Lisa Rodriguez, he reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy was no longer ruled by fear and domination, but by hope and mutual respect. Species that had once been enemies now worked together to solve problems and explore new frontiers. The final scene of the transformation came when a joint, human-alien colony ship launched toward the Magellanic Clouds, carrying settlers from 12 different species to establish the first truly integrated community outside the home galaxy. Among the colonists were humans and former council species, working together to build something new among the stars. Jake Morrison, now an old man, watched the launch from his retirement home on Earth. Beside him sat his granddaughter, a young woman who had grown up in a galaxy where species cooperation was normal rather than revolutionary. "Grandpa," she asked, "what was it like when the species couldn't get along?" Jake smiled and put his arm around her shoulders. It was lonely, sweetheart. Very lonely, but that's all over now. Above them, the stars shone down on a galaxy finally at peace with itself, where the dreams of cooperation and understanding had become reality.